The fluorescent lights in the evidence room buzzed like trapped insects. Detective Marcus Webb sat alone, hunched over a boxy television set that belonged in a museum, not a police station. The VHS player beneath it whirred and clicked, struggling with a tape that had been sitting in a cardboard box for 20 years. On the screen, a shaky home video played. Summer 1991. A backyard somewhere in North Idaho. Two kids, a boy and a girl, chased each other around a swing set while their mother hung laundry on a clothesline. The footage had that washed-out quality of old camcorder recordings, all faded blues and yellows, the audio muffled by wind and distance. Marcus rubbed his eyes. He'd been watching these tapes for 6 hours straight. His coffee had gone cold, his neck ached, but something kept pulling him back to this particular clip. He rewound 15 seconds. Pressed play. The boy, maybe 13, 14, laughed as he dodged his sister. The mother smiled, clipping a bedsheet to the line. Normal, innocent. The kind of moment families forget the second after it happens. But Marcus wasn't watching the family. His eyes were locked on the background, beyond the swing set, past the garden shed, where the tree line started, thick with ponderosa pines and shadows. There, a flash of red, just for a moment, then gone. Marcus hit pause. The image froze, pixelated and grainy. He leaned closer, squinting at the screen. Between two trees, barely visible through the branches, was the edge of a vehicle. Red paint, a curved fender. The rest hidden in the woods. His pulse quickened. He rewound again, watched it 3 more times. Each time, the red car appeared for exactly 2.5 seconds before the camera panned away, following the kids toward the house. Marcus grabbed a notepad, scribbled down the timestamp. Then he fast-forwarded to the next clip on the tape. Different day, same backyard. This time, the father was mowing the lawn while the kids played with a dog. The camera zoomed in on the dog catching a frisbee, then pulled back to capture the whole scene. And there it was again. The red car, parked in the same spot, watching from the trees. Marcus's hand trembled as he ejected the tape and reached for another one. Tape 9, dated August 1991. This one showed the family at a Little League game. The camera followed the boy as he stepped up to bat, then panned across the bleachers. In the parking lot behind the field, barely in frame, the red car. Jesus Christ, Marcus whispered. He stood up, paced the small room, ran his hands through his hair. His mind was racing. These weren't home movies. They couldn't be. The angles were wrong, the distance, the way the camera lingered on the family, tracking their movements like a predator studying prey. Someone had been filming the Kessler family without their knowledge. Someone had been watching them for months. And 20 years ago, on September 14th, 1991, the Kesslers had vanished from their home outside Sandpoint, Idaho, and were never seen again, until now. Marcus looked back at the frozen image on the screen, the red car hiding in the shadows, and felt a chill crawl down his spine. What he'd just discovered would crack open one of North Idaho's oldest and darkest mysteries. But the truth, waiting at the end, that would be so much worse than anyone imagined. Before we go any further into what Detective Webb uncovered, do me a favor, if you're into true crime cases that'll keep you up at night, hit that subscribe button right now. Trust me, you're going to want to follow this one all the way to the end. And drop a comment below where you're watching from right now. I want to know who's out there diving into this mystery with me. 20 years earlier, September 14th, 1991, a Saturday. The Kessler family lived in a modest 2-story house about 8 miles outside Sandpoint, Idaho, tucked into a stretch of land where the forests grew thick, and the nearest neighbor was a 1/4 mile down a gravel road. It wasn't isolated in the horror movie sense. There were other homes scattered through the area, mailboxes along the highway, the occasional bark of a dog carrying through the trees. But it was quiet, private. The kind of place where you could sit on your porch at night and hear nothing but wind and crickets. Daniel Kessler was 41, a construction foreman with calloused hands and a reputation for showing up early and staying late. He'd lived in Idaho his whole life, grew up in Coeur d'Alene, met his wife Rita at a county fair when they were both 19. They'd been married 22 years, 2 kids, a mortgage, a life that looked, from the outside, exactly like what they'd planned. Rita was 38, worked part-time at the Sandpoint Public Library 3 days a week. She loved mystery novels and hated cooking, but did it anyway because Daniel couldn't boil water without setting off the smoke alarm. She had a quiet laugh and a habit of humming while she folded laundry. Their son, Jacob, was 14, freshman year at Lake Pendore High School. Played baseball, decent grades, spent too much time on the phone with a girl named Ashley from his English class. He wanted to be a pilot someday, had posters of fighter jets taped to his bedroom walls. Their daughter Megan was 10, 4th grade, obsessed with horses even though she'd only ridden one twice in her life. She collected stickers, kept a diary with a lock on it, and had a gap between her front teeth that she hated but her parents thought was adorable. They were ordinary, unremarkable, the kind of family you'd pass in a grocery store and forget 5 minutes later. And on the night of September 14th, 1991, they disappeared. The last confirmed sighting was at 8:47 p.m. A neighbor, Glenn Torrance, drove past the Kessler house on his way home from a friend's place. He'd remember later that the lights were on in the living room and kitchen. The porch light was on too. Daniel's truck was parked in the driveway. Everything looked normal. Glenn didn't stop, didn't wave, just kept driving. By the next morning, the Kesslers were gone. It was the mail carrier who noticed first. Sunday morning, around 10:15 a.m., Brenda Kowalski pulled up to the Kessler mailbox to drop off a package, something Rita had ordered from a catalog. Brenda couldn't remember what. She noticed the car was missing. That wasn't unusual. Families went places on weekends, but the front door was open, not wide open, just ajar. Maybe 6 inches. Enough that Brenda could see into the entryway from the road. She sat in her mail truck for a moment, debating. It wasn't really her business. Maybe they'd left in a hurry, forgot to pull it shut. Maybe the wind caught it, but something felt off. Brenda parked, walked up the driveway, called out, "Hello, Kesslers? Anyone home?" No answer. She stepped onto the porch, knocked on the door frame. "Rita? Daniel?" Silence. She pushed the door open a little wider and looked inside. The living room was untouched. Couch, coffee table, TV, a pair of Megan's sneakers by the stairs, a jacket draped over a chair. But from where she stood, Brenda could see into the kitchen. The table was set. 4 plates, 4 glasses, forks and knives laid out. Food still on the plate, spaghetti, it looked like. Garlic bread in a basket in the center of the table, like they'd been in the middle of dinner and just stopped. Brenda's stomach tightened. She called out again, louder this time. "Is anyone here?" Nothing. She backed out of the house, hurried to her truck, and drove straight to the nearest payphone. Bonner County Sheriff's deputies arrived at 11:03 a.m. 2 officers, Deputy Ron Callahan and Deputy Lisa Marsh, walked through the house, calling out, checking rooms. The place was eerily still. No signs of a struggle. No broken windows. No kicked-in doors. Everything in its place, except the people. In the kitchen, the food on the plates had started to dry out. The spaghetti was stiff, the sauce congealed, the garlic bread was hard. Ron estimated it had been sitting there at least 12 hours, maybe longer. 4 plates, 4 servings, like the whole family had sat down to eat and then vanished mid-meal. Rita's purse was on the kitchen counter, wallet inside, $43 in cash, credit cards, driver's license. Her keys were missing, but Daniel's truck keys were hanging on a hook by the back door. Upstairs, the bedrooms were undisturbed. Beds made, clothes in the closets. Megan's diary sat on her nightstand, a pen resting on top of it. Jacob's homework was spread across his desk, math problems, half finished. The bathroom showed signs of recent use. Damp towels, toothbrushes in the holder. In the master bedroom, the closet door was open. A suitcase sat on the floor, empty. A few dresser drawers were pulled out slightly, like someone had been going through them. But nothing was packed. Nothing was missing, except the family. And their car, a 1987 Buick Century, tan Idaho plates. Deputy Marsh found something else. In the basement, behind a closed door, the family dog was locked in the laundry room. A black lab mix named Copper. He was frantic, barking, scratching at the door. His water bowl was empty. There was a mess in the corner where he'd relieved himself. Lisa opened the door, and the dog bolted past her, up the stairs, running through the house like he was searching for someone. Ron looked at Lisa. They wouldn't leave the dog locked up like that. No, she agreed. They wouldn't. By that afternoon, the Kessler house was a crime scene. Sheriff's deputies cordoned off the property with yellow tape. Detectives were called in. The lead investigator, Detective Ray Holcomb, arrived just after 2 p.m. He was 56, a veteran of the department, known for his methodical approach and his refusal to jump to conclusions. But even Ray felt the weight of wrongness when he stepped inside that house. He stood in the kitchen, staring at the table. 4 plates, 4 lives interrupted. "Any sign of forced entry?" he asked. "None," Ron said. "Doors were unlocked, but no damage. No broken locks. Blood? Weapons? Nothing." Ray walked through the house slowly, taking it all in. He checked the windows, all closed, latched from the inside. He examined the back door, unlocked, but no scratches on the lock, no signs of tampering. He went upstairs, looked through the bedrooms. Everything was too normal, too neat, except for that suitcase in the master bedroom, and the open drawers. Ray crouched down, ran his hand along the carpet near the closet. No scuff marks, no signs of a struggle. But something had happened here. He could feel it. By evening, the investigation kicked into high gear. An APB was issued for the Kessler family and their vehicle. Descriptions circulated to every law enforcement agency in Idaho, Washington, and Montana. Hospitals were contacted. Relatives were called. Daniel's brother, who lived in Spokane, hadn't heard from him in 2 weeks. Rita's mother, who lived in Boise, said Rita had called her on Friday night, the night before they disappeared, and everything seemed fine. They'd talked about Megan's upcoming birthday party. No one had any idea where they'd gone, or why. Search parties formed. Volunteers from Sandpoint and the surrounding areas combed the woods near the Kessler property, calling out names, looking for any sign of the family. Dive teams were dispatched to Lake Pend Oreya, dragging the shallows near the shore. Nothing. The Buick never turned up. No transactions on their credit cards. No phone calls. No sightings. It was like the Kessler family had been erased. Detective Ray Holcomb sat in his office late that night, going over the details again and again. A family doesn't just vanish. Not like this. There were only a few possibilities. 1. They left voluntarily, packed up in a hurry, drove off, started a new life somewhere. But why leave the dog? Why leave dinner on the table? Why leave Rita's purse? 2. They were taken, abducted. But by who? And why? There was no ransom demand, no enemies, no threats. 3. They were dead, murdered, bodies hidden somewhere. But where? And again, why? Ray leaned back in his chair, rubbed his temples. He had a bad feeling about this one. A very bad feeling. Monday morning, September 16th, 1991. 48 hours since anyone had seen the Kesslers. The investigation shifted from missing persons to something darker. Detective Ray Holcomb stood in the Sandpoint Sheriff's Department briefing room, facing a dozen deputies, volunteers, and state police officers who'd driven in from Coeur d'Alene. A map of Bonner County was pinned to the wall behind him, red circles marking search zones, question marks scattered across highways and back roads. "We're treating this as a potential abduction," Ray said, his voice steady but grim. 4 people don't vanish without a trace unless someone made them vanish. He pointed to a photo of the Kessler family, taped to the board, a snapshot from a church directory, all 4 of them smiling. Daniel in a flannel shirt, Rita with her arm around Megan, Jacob standing tall next to his dad. Daniel Kessler, 41. Rita, 38. Jacob, 14. Megan, 10. Last confirmed sighting was Saturday night, around 8:47 p.m. Their vehicle, a tan 1987 Buick Century, is missing. No activity on credit cards, no phone calls, no witnesses. A deputy raised his hand. "What about the dog?" "Locked in the basement," Ray said. "Hadn't been fed or watered. That tells me whatever happened, it happened fast. They didn't have time to make arrangements." Another officer spoke up. "Any signs of struggle?" "None. House was clean. Doors unlocked. Dinner left on the table like they'd just stood up and walked out. So maybe they did, someone suggested. Maybe it was voluntary. Ray shook his head. Rita's purse was still there. Wallet, cash, ID. You don't leave that behind if you're planning to go somewhere. And you sure as hell don't leave your 10-year-old daughter's birthday present sitting in the closet if you're skipping town. The room went quiet. Ray continued. We've contacted family, friends, co-workers. No one's heard from them. No one saw anything unusual. No fights, no financial trouble, no marital problems. By all accounts, the Kesslers were a normal, stable family. He paused. Let that sink in, which means someone targeted them. And we need to figure out who. The next 72 hours were a blur of interviews, searches, and dead ends. Detectives fanned out across Sandpoint and the surrounding areas, knocking on doors, asking questions. Did you see anything Saturday night? Did you hear anything? Do you know the Kesslers? Most people didn't. The family kept to themselves. Friendly, but not social. Daniel worked long hours. Rita spent her time at the library or at home. The kids went to school, played sports, hung out with friends. No enemies, no drama, no red flags. One neighbor, a retired schoolteacher named Phyllis Crane, mentioned that she'd seen a car parked on the side of the road near the Kessler property a few times over the summer. She couldn't remember the make or model, just that it was red, maybe maroon, and it seemed out of place. Did you see who was driving? Ray asked. Phyllis shook her head. Never got close enough. Just noticed it sitting there a couple times when I drove by. Figured it was someone pulled over to check a map or something. Ray made a note. A red car. It wasn't much, but it was something. Search teams continued combing the woods. Volunteers walked shoulder to shoulder through the dense pines surrounding the Kessler property, calling out names, looking for clothing, footprints, anything. Cadaver dogs were brought in, sniffing through the underbrush, but they didn't hit on anything. Dive teams searched the shallows of Lake Pendoray, dragging the murky water near the boat launches and campgrounds. Nothing. Helicopters flew grid patterns over the forests and logging roads, scanning for the tan Buick. Nothing. It was like the family had been swallowed whole. Ray interviewed Daniel's co-workers at the construction company. They all said the same thing. Daniel was reliable, hard-working, well-liked. He'd been on the job for 11 years, never missed a day unless one of the kids was sick. No conflicts with anyone, no gambling debts, no affairs, no shady side deals. Did he seem worried about anything recently? Ray asked the site foreman, a grizzled man named Tom Briggs. Tom thought for a moment. Not worried, exactly. But, I don't know. The last couple weeks, he seemed distracted, like his mind was somewhere else. Did he say why? Nope. I asked him once if everything was okay at home, and he just said, yeah, everything's fine. Didn't push it. Ray made another note. Distracted. Could mean nothing. Could mean everything. Rita's co-workers at the library painted a similar picture. She was quiet, dependable, loved books more than people. She'd worked there part-time for 6 years, mostly shelving returns and helping patrons find titles. No conflicts, no complaints. But one librarian, a woman named Denise Halford, mentioned something that stuck with Ray. About a month ago, Denise said, Rita asked me if we had any books on surveillance, like how to tell if someone's watching you. Ray's head snapped up. She said that? Yeah. I thought it was weird, but I figured maybe she was reading a thriller or something and wanted to fact-check. I pointed her to a couple true crime books, and she thanked me, and that was it. Did she say why she was asking? No, and I didn't press. Rita wasn't the type to open up about personal stuff. Ray felt a chill crawl up his spine. Surveillance. Someone watching. The red car Phyllis had seen. The pieces weren't connecting yet, but they were starting to form a shape. On Wednesday, September 18th, the case made regional news. Local stations ran segments on the missing Kessler family, showing their photos, describing the vehicle, asking anyone with information to call the tip line. The story spread to Spokane, then Boise, then Seattle. Tips started pouring in. Someone claimed they saw the Buick at a rest stop near Missoula, Montana. Turned out to be a different car. Another caller said they saw a family matching the Kesslers' description at a diner in Lewiston, Idaho. Deputies checked it out. Wrong family. A psychic from Tacoma called and said she had a vision of the Kesslers being held in a cabin near the Canadian border. Ray filed that one in the trash. Every lead fizzled. Every tip went nowhere. By the end of the first week, frustration was setting in. Ray sat in his office, surrounded by case files, photos, maps, timelines. He'd barely slept. His wife had stopped asking when he'd be home. He kept coming back to the same questions. Why the Kesslers? What made them targets? And where the hell were they? He pulled out the interview notes from Denise Halford, the librarian. Rita had asked about surveillance, about being watched. Ray picked up the phone, called the library, asked if they kept records of what patrons checked out. They did. 20 minutes later, he had a list of books Rita Kessler had borrowed in the months leading up to her disappearance. Most were mystery novels. Agatha, Christie, Sue, Grafton, nothing unusual. But 3 titles stood out. The Gift of Fear, by Gavin de Becker, a book about recognizing danger signals. How to Disappear, Completely, a guide on going off the grid, without a trace. The Unsolved Disappearances of America, a true crime anthology. Ray stared at the list. Rita Kessler had been afraid of something, or someone, and she'd been trying to figure out how to protect her family. That night, Ray drove out to the Kessler property alone. The house was dark, still wrapped in yellow tape. He parked in the driveway, sat there for a moment, staring at the front door. Then he got out, walked around to the backyard. The swing set creaked in the wind. The garden shed sat silent. Beyond the yard, the tree line loomed, black and impenetrable. Ray stood there, looking into the woods, and for the first time since the case started, he felt it. The presence of something watching, something patient. Something that had been there long before the Kesslers disappeared. He turned, walked back to his car, and drove away. But the feeling stayed with him. Weeks turned into months. By October 1991, the search parties had dwindled. Volunteers went back to their jobs, their families, their lives. The helicopters stopped flying. The dive teams packed up their gear. The tip line still rang occasionally, but most calls were from well-meaning people who'd seen the story on the news and thought they recognized a family at a gas station or a rest stop. None of them panned out. Detective Ray Holcomb refused to let go. He worked the case obsessively, following every thread, no matter how thin. He drove hundreds of miles chasing leads that went nowhere. He interviewed distant relatives, old classmates, people who'd barely known the Kesslers. He reviewed the evidence again and again, looking for something he'd missed. The red car kept coming up. 3 different witnesses, Phyllis Crane, a postal worker named Eddie Marsh, and a teenager who'd been hiking near the Kessler property in July, all mentioned seeing a red sedan in the area at various times over the summer of 1991. None of them got a plate number. None of them saw the driver clearly. Ray ran DMV searches for red sedans registered in Bonner County. There were 47. He tracked down 32 of them, interviewed the owners, checked alibis. Nothing stuck. The other 15 were either sold, junked, or registered to people who'd moved out of state. Dead ends, all of them. By December, the case was losing momentum. The Bonner County Sheriff's Department had other crimes to investigate, other cases demanding attention. Resources were stretched thin. The higher-ups started pressuring Ray to scale back, to accept that the Kesslers might never be found. Ray pushed back. Hard. They didn't just evaporate, he said during a tense meeting with the sheriff. Someone took them. Someone killed them. And that person is still out there. We don't know that, the sheriff replied. We don't have bodies. We don't have a crime scene. We don't even have proof a crime was committed. Then what the hell happened to them? The sheriff sighed. I don't know, Ray. But we can't keep throwing manpower at this. Not without new evidence. Ray left the meeting furious, but he knew the sheriff was right. Without a break in the case, they were spinning their wheels. 1,992 came and went. The Kessler house sat empty. Daniel's brother tried to keep up with the mortgage payments for a while, hoping the family would come back, but eventually he couldn't afford it. The bank foreclosed. The house went up for auction. A family from Spokane bought it in the spring of 1993. They moved in, repainted the walls, replaced the carpets. They had no idea what had happened there. Or maybe they did and didn't care. Life moved on, but Ray didn't. He kept a file on his desk, thick, dog-eared, held together with rubber bands. He added to it whenever something new came in, which wasn't often. A possible sighting in Oregon that turned out to be nothing. A hiker who found a rusted car part in the woods that didn't match the Buick. A conspiracy theorist who claimed the Kesslers had been abducted by a survivalist cult operating in the Idaho panhandle. Ray checked it out anyway. The cult existed, but they had alibis. They'd been in Montana the weekend the Kesslers disappeared, attending some kind of gathering. Dozens of witnesses confirmed it. Another dead end. By 1994, the case was functionally cold. Ray still worked it when he could, but other cases took priority. Burglaries, assaults, a string of meth lab busts that consumed most of the department's resources. The Kessler file got buried under newer, more urgent investigations. But once a year, on September 14th, the anniversary of their disappearance, the local paper ran a story. A reminder, a plea for information, and once a year, a small group of people gathered at the Sandpoint Community Church to hold a vigil. Rita's mother came every time, clutching a photo of her daughter and grandchildren, her face hollowed out by grief. Daniel's brother came too, though he stopped talking to reporters after the second year. They lit candles. They prayed. They hoped. But hope was a fragile thing, and it was fading fast. In 1995, Ray Holcomb got a call that made his heart race. A hunter had found human remains in the woods near Priest River, about 30 miles from where the Kesslers had lived. Ray drove out there immediately, adrenaline surging. This could be it. This could finally be the break. The remains were skeletal, scattered by animals. A forensic team was called in. They worked the site for 2 days, carefully excavating bones, searching for clothing, identification, anything. Ray waited. Barely ate, barely slept. When the results came back, his stomach dropped. The remains belonged to a male, approximately 60 years old. Cause of death, natural causes, likely a heart attack. The man had been a transient, probably died while camping in the woods. His ID was eventually traced through dental records, a drifter from Oregon with no connection to the Kesslers. Ray sat in his car after hearing the news and punched the steering wheel so hard he bruised his hand. By the end of 1995, even Ray had to admit the trail was ice cold. He'd followed every lead, interviewed hundreds of people, driven thousands of miles, spent countless hours staring at maps, timelines, evidence logs, and he had nothing. No bodies, no suspects, no answers. The Kessler family had vanished, and whoever was responsible had gotten away with it. Ray started having nightmares. He'd dream about the house, the dinner table, the 4 plates of cold spaghetti. He'd dream about walking through the woods, calling their names, hearing nothing but silence. He'd wake up in a cold sweat, his wife shaking his shoulder, asking if he was okay. He wasn't. The case stayed open, technically. Unsolved cases never officially closed. But in practice, it was over. The Kessler file was moved to a storage room in the basement of the sheriff's department, boxed up with dozens of other cold cases. The evidence, photos, reports, the few items collected from the house, was catalogued and shelved. Ray kept a copy of the file at home. He couldn't let it go. Even when he wasn't actively working it, it was always there, lurking in the back of his mind. Who were you? He'd think, staring at the notes about the red car, the surveillance books Rita had checked out. What did you want with them? He never got an answer. In the years that followed, the Kessler case became a local legend. People talked about it in hushed tones at diners and bars. Teenagers dared each other to walk past the old Kessler house at night. True crime enthusiasts posted about it on early internet forums, speculating about what had happened. Some thought the family had been murdered by a drifter. Others believed they'd been taken by someone they knew, a neighbor, a co-worker, someone who'd been hiding in plain sight. A few thought they'd run away, started new lives under new names, but no one knew for sure. And as the years passed, the case faded from public memory. The Kesslers became ghosts, a story people half remembered, a mystery that would never be solved. Or so everyone thought. This case could have stayed buried forever. But 2 decades later, something surfaced that changed everything. Before we get there, if you're hooked, smash that like button and drop a comment. What time is it where you are right now? Let me know. The world kept turning. By 1996, the Kessler case had become a footnote, mentioned occasionally in true crime books about unsolved disappearances, listed in databases of missing persons, but no longer actively investigated. The file sat in storage, gathering dust. Detective Ray Holcomb tried to move on. He worked other cases, solved some, lost sleep over others, but the Kesslers never left him. Every September 14th, he'd pull out his personal copy of the file, flip through the pages, study the photos, and wonder, where are you? What happened to you? Who took you? The questions haunted him. In 1998, the case got a brief moment of renewed attention. A true crime television show, one of those low-budget cable programs that dramatized unsolved mysteries, featured the Kessler disappearance in a 15-minute segment. They interviewed Ray, showed photos of the family, recreated the scene with actors walking through a house that looked nothing like the real one. The episode ended with a toll-free number flashing on the screen, asking viewers to call if they had information. The tip line lit up for about a week. Most calls were useless. People claiming they'd seen the Kesslers in Florida, Texas, Alaska, psychics offering visions, conspiracy theorists spinning elaborate tales about government cover-ups and witness protection programs. One caller said they'd seen a tan Buick abandoned in a ravine near Bonner's Ferry. Ray drove out there with a deputy, hiked down into the ravine, and found a rusted-out Chevy from the 1972. Not even close. After 2 weeks, the calls stopped. The case slipped back into obscurity. Ray Holcomb retired in 2003. He was 68. His knees were shot, and his wife had been begging him to quit for years. He'd given the department 34 years of his life. It was time. On his last day, he cleaned out his desk, said his goodbyes, and carried 3 boxes to his car. 2 of them were personal items, photos, commendations, a coffee mug his grandkids had given him. The 3rd box was the Kessler file. He wasn't supposed to take it. Technically, it was department property. But no one stopped him. No one even noticed. Ray brought it home, set it on a shelf in his garage, and told himself he'd stop thinking about it. He didn't. The early 2000s brought new technology. DNA databases expanded. Cold case units formed in police departments across the country, using advanced forensics to crack decades-old mysteries. Shows like Cold Case Files and Forensic Files became cultural phenomena. Ray watched them religiously. He'd sit in his recliner, a beer in hand, and study the techniques. Mitochondrial DNA, forensic genealogy, digital reconstruction. He'd think about the Kessler case, wonder if any of these new tools could help. But without bodies, without evidence, there was nothing to test. The case remained frozen in time. In 2007, a Reddit user started a thread about the Kessler disappearance. It was part of a larger subreddit dedicated to unsolved mysteries, and the post gained traction quickly. Armchair detectives dissected every detail, proposed theories, argued in the comments. Some thought Daniel had been involved in something illegal, drugs, maybe, or organized crime, and the family had been killed as a message. Others believed it was a random act of violence, wrong place, wrong time. A few suggested the family had staged their own disappearance, though they couldn't explain why or how. One user posted a theory that stood out. What if someone was stalking them? What if this wasn't random at all, but planned? Someone who watched them, learned their routines, waited for the right moment. The comment got buried under dozens of others, but it was the closest anyone had come to the truth. Ray didn't know about the Reddit thread. He wasn't online much, but he kept working the case in his own way. He'd drive out to Sandpoint sometimes, park near the old Kessler property, and just sit there. The house had changed hands twice since the family from Spokane moved in. The current owners had added a deck, repainted it blue, put up a fence. It didn't look like the place where a family had vanished anymore, but Ray could still see it. The yellow tape, the search teams, the empty kitchen table. He'd sit in his car, staring at the tree line, and think about the red car, the one that had been seen multiple times, the one he'd never been able to track down. Whoever drove that car knew something. Ray was sure of it. By 2010, the Kessler case had been cold for nearly 2 decades. The annual vigils had stopped. Rita's mother had passed away in 2006, Daniel's brother had moved to Arizona and stopped returning calls from reporters. The few people who still remembered the case were aging, their memories fading. The Kesslers were becoming forgotten, lost to time. Ray was 75 now, his health declining. He had diabetes, high blood pressure, a bad hip. His wife worried about him constantly, but he still kept the file, still pulled it out on sleepless nights, still wondered. In the Bonner County Sheriff's Department, a new generation of detectives had taken over. Most of them had never heard of the Kessler case. It was ancient history, buried in a storage room they rarely visited. The department had moved to digital records, and a lot of the old files hadn't been scanned yet. The Kesslers were a ghost story now, a cautionary tale older deputies told rookies over coffee. Back in '91, a whole family vanished. Never found them, never found the car, never found a damn thing. And the rookies would shake their heads, say something like, "That's crazy," and move on, because what else could you do? Some cases just didn't get solved. But in May 2011, something changed. Something small. Something that shouldn't have mattered. A tarnished silver locket showed up at a pawn shop in Coeur d'Alene. And inside that locket was a photograph. A family. 4 people. Smiling. And a date engraved on the back. The 14th of September 2091. Glenn Hardwick had owned Hardwick Pawn and Trade in Coeur d'Alene for 23 years. He'd seen it all. Stolen guitars, wedding rings from bitter divorces, tools lifted from construction sites. Jewelry that people swore was a family heirloom, but was really just costume junk bought at a department store. Glenn had a good eye. He could spot a fake Rolex from across the counter. He knew when someone was lying about where they got something, and he knew when something felt wrong. The locket felt wrong. It came in on a Tuesday afternoon, May 17th, 2011. A guy walked into the shop mid-40s, scraggly beard, worn-out jeans, flannel shirt that had seen better days. He smelled like cigarettes and cheap motel soap. He pulled the locket out of his pocket, set it on the counter. "How much?" he asked. Glenn picked it up, turned it over in his hands. It was silver, tarnished and dull, the kind of piece that had been sitting in a drawer or a box for years. The chain was delicate, a little tangled. The locket itself was oval-shaped, about the size of a quarter, with a simple engraved pattern on the front flowers, maybe, or vines. Hard to tell through the tarnish. "Where'd you get this?" Glenn asked. The guy shrugged. "Storage unit. Bought it at auction last month up in Priest River. Bunch of junk inside. Figured I'd sell what I could." Glenn nodded. That was common enough. People bought storage units sight unseen, hoping to find something valuable. Most of the time it was garbage. Occasionally, you'd get lucky. He opened the locket. Inside was a photograph. Old, faded, cracked down the middle. It showed a family. A man, a woman, 2 kids. They were standing outside, trees in the background, all of them smiling. The photo had that washed-out quality of pictures from the late 80 seconds or early 90 seconds. Glenn flipped the locket over. On the back, engraved in small, neat letters, was a date. The 14th of September 2091. Glenn stared at it. Something about that date tugged at his memory. He couldn't place it, but it felt significant. "I'll give you $40, Glenn said. The guy took the cash and left without another word. Glenn set the locket aside, went about his day. But the date kept nagging at him. The 14th of September 2091. Where had he heard that before? That night, Glenn went home and did something he rarely did. He Googled the date. He typed in the 14th of September 2091 Idaho and hit search. The results came back immediately. The first link was a news article from 1991. Sandpoint family vanishes without a trace, the 14th of September 1991. Glenn clicked it. The article was from the Spokesman Review, dated September 20th, 1991. It detailed the disappearance of the Kessler family, Daniel, Rita, Jacob, and Megan. It described the scene: dinner left on the table, the car missing, no signs of struggle. It mentioned the ongoing investigation, the search efforts, the plea for information. Glenn scrolled down. There was a photo. The Kessler family, standing outside their home, all 4 of them smiling. Glenn's stomach dropped. It was the same photo. The exact same one inside the locket. He grabbed the locket from his jacket pocket, opened it, held it up next to the screen. No question. Same family. Same pose. Same background. Glenn sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The Kesslers had disappeared on September 14th, 1991, the date engraved on the locket. And now, 20 years later, their locket had ended up in his pawn shop. He picked up his phone and called the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. Detective Marcus Webb got the call the next morning. He was 32, relatively new to the detective division, but he'd grown up in North Idaho and knew the local lore. The Kessler case had been taught at the police academy as an example of an unsolved mystery, a cautionary tale about cases that go cold despite your best efforts. Marcus had never worked it, obviously. It was decades old. But he knew the basics. When the dispatcher told him a pawn shop owner had found a locket connected to the Kesslers, Marcus thought it was a prank, but he drove over anyway. Glenn was waiting for him when he arrived, the locket sitting on the counter in a plastic evidence bag. "I didn't touch it much after I realized what it was," Glenn said. "Figured you'd want it clean." Marcus pulled on a pair of latex gloves, opened the bag, and examined the locket. The photo inside was unmistakable. He'd seen it in the case file during training. The Kessler family, smiling, frozen in time. He flipped it over. "Read the engraved date, the 14th of September 2091. Marcus felt a chill run through him. "You said the guy who brought this in bought it from a storage unit?" Marcus asked. "Yeah, up in Priest River. Said he bought it at auction last month. You get his name?" Glenn nodded, slid a receipt across the counter. "Curtis Albright. Paid him in cash, but I always get a name and ID for my records." Marcus took the receipt, pulled out his phone, and ran the name through the system. Curtis Albright, 46 years old. Address in Sandpoint. No major priors, a couple of misdemeanors, petty theft, nothing violent. "Thanks," Marcus said. "I'll take it from here." Marcus found Curtis Albright 2 hours later at a rundown apartment complex on the outskirts of Sandpoint. Curtis answered the door in a stained undershirt, holding a can of beer even though it was barely noon. "Curtis Albright?" Marcus asked, showing his badge. Curtis's face went pale. "I didn't do anything. Relax. I just want to ask you about a locket you sold to a pawn shop in Coeur d'Alene." Curtis exhaled, visibly relieved. "Oh, yeah, that thing. What about it? Where'd you get it?" "Told the guy at the shop I bought a storage unit at auction, up in Priest River, last month. Unit was full of junk, old furniture, boxes of clothes, some camera equipment. I've been selling off what I can. You still have the rest of the stuff." "Some of it. Most of it's garbage. I threw a lot away." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. "I need to see what's left." Curtis led Marcus to a storage shed behind the apartment building. Inside was a chaotic mess. Broken chairs, cardboard boxes, a rusted filing cabinet, a stack of old VHS tapes. Marcus's eyes locked on the tapes. "Those came from the unit?" he asked. "Yeah, I was going to toss them, but I figured maybe someone collects that kind of thing. You know, vintage stuff." Marcus picked up one of the tapes. It was unlabeled. The plastic case cracked. He picked up another. Same thing. No labels. No writing. "How many of these were there?" Curtis shrugged. "I don't know. Maybe 30? 40? I threw some away already." Marcus felt his stomach tighten. "I'm going to need all of this. Everything from that storage unit. Don't throw anything else away." Curtis looked confused. "Why? What's this about?" Marcus didn't answer. He was already on his phone, calling for a forensics team. By that evening, Marcus had the contents of the storage unit loaded into evidence at the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. Boxes of photographs, dozens of VHS tapes, a ledger, camera equipment, lenses, tripods, a camcorder from the early 90s. Marcus sat in the evidence room, staring at it all. Whoever had owned this storage unit had been documenting something, recording something. He opened the ledger. Inside were handwritten entries, dates, locations, notes. Most of it was cryptic, abbreviations, shorthand. But one entry, dated the 12th of July, 1991, was clear. Kessler, property. Ongoing. Marcus's hands started shaking. He flipped through more pages, found another entry. Kessler, Sunday morning routine. Church at 9:30 a.m. Another. Kessler. Jacob's baseball game. Thursday 6 p.m. Another. Kessler. Rita grocery shopping. Tuesdays. Marcus set the ledger down, his heart pounding. Someone had been watching the Kessler family, tracking them, studying them. He looked at the stack of VHS tapes, and he knew, with absolute certainty, that whatever was on those tapes would change everything. Marcus loaded the first tape into the VCR. The screen flickered. Static. Then an image appeared. A backyard. A swing set. 2 kids playing. The Kessler kids. The camera was zoomed in, shaky, clearly handheld. The angle was wrong, too distant, too hidden. This wasn't a family home video. This was surveillance. Marcus watched, transfixed, as the footage continued. The kids laughing, their mother hanging laundry, their father working in the garden, and in the background, barely visible through the trees, a red car. Marcus rewound the tape, paused it, stared at the screen. The red car, the one witnesses had mentioned 20 years ago, the one Detective Ray Holcomb had never been able to find. It was right there, on tape. Marcus grabbed his phone, his hands trembling. He had to call Ray Holcomb. He had to tell him. After 20 years, the case was about to break wide open. Donovan Eich. The name sat heavy in the room, like a stone dropped into still water. Marcus pulled up everything he could find on the man. DMV records, tax filings, death certificate, employment history. It wasn't much, but it was enough to start building a profile. Donovan Michael Eich, born February 9th, 1959, in Bonners Ferry, Idaho. Died November 12th, 2004, in Priest River. Cause of death, heart attack. He was 45. No wife, no kids, no close family, except a sister, Marla Eich, who still lived in Sandpoint. Donovan had worked odd jobs most of his life. Construction, landscaping, freelance photography. He'd never held a steady position for more than a year or two. Drifted from town to town, always staying within the Idaho panhandle. Ray stared at the photo on Donovan's driver's license. Thin face, hollow eyes, unkempt hair. The kind of guy you'd pass on the street and forget immediately. He was invisible, Ray muttered. What? Marcus asked. Guys like this, they blend in. No one notices them. No one remembers them. That's how they get away with it. Marcus nodded. We need to go through those tapes frame by frame. If the red car shows up in any of them, we might be able to confirm it's his. Already on it, Aaron Lim said from across the room. He was hunched over a computer, running enhancement software on the footage. Give me a few hours. By late afternoon, Aaron had results. He called Marcus and Ray over to his workstation, pointed at the screen. Tape 14, the one showing the Kessler backyard. I enhanced the background. The image on the screen was grainy, but clearer than before. The tree line, the shadows, and there, partially hidden behind the pines, a red sedan. Aaron zoomed in further. The image pixelated, but the shape was unmistakable. Early 90 seconds, Chevy Cavalier, red paint, and on the rear bumper, a dent. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Can you get a plate? Aaron shook his head. Too far away, too much shadow, but the dent matches the description from the 1,991 reports. Ray leaned closer, squinting at the screen. That's him. That's the car. Aaron pulled up another image. This is from tape 16, the baseball game. Same car, same dent, parked in the lot, partially obscured by other vehicles. And this is from tape 18, the one where he's filming through the kitchen window. The image showed the edge of a vehicle in the bottom corner of the frame, just the front fender and part of the hood. Red paint, Chevy emblem. It's the same car in every tape, Aaron said. No question. Marcus turned to Ray. We need to find that car. Ray made a call to the Idaho DMV. The Chevy Cavalier registered to Donovan Eich had been reported as totaled in 2003, a year before Donovan died. Insurance payout. The vehicle was sent to a salvage yard in Post Falls. Marcus called the salvage yard. They had records going back to 1998, but nothing from 2003. The car had likely been crushed and scrapped years ago. Dead end. But Ray wasn't ready to give up. If Donovan kept all those tapes, all that camera equipment, he was a hoarder, Ray said. Guys like that don't throw things away. If the car was totaled, maybe he kept parts of it. Souvenirs. Marcus frowned. Where would he keep them? His property. Wherever he was living before he died. Marcus pulled Donovan's last known address from the death certificate. A trailer. Located on a dirt road about 12 miles outside Priest River, deep in the woods. Is it still there? Ray asked. Marcus ran a property search. The land was still registered to Donovan Eich. No one had claimed it after his death. No taxes paid since 2005. Technically, it was in foreclosure limbo, owned by the county, but never auctioned off. It's abandoned, Marcus said. Ray stood up, grabbed his jacket. Then let's go. They drove out to the property the next morning. Marcus, Ray, and 2 forensic techs in a white van. The road was barely a road, more like a rutted path, carved through the trees, overgrown with weeds and brush. Branches scraped the sides of the vehicles as they pushed deeper into the woods. After 20 minutes, they found it. The trailer sat in a small clearing, surrounded by towering pines. It was a single-wide, rusted and sagging, the windows shattered, the door hanging off its hinges. Vines had crawled up the sides. The roof was caved in on one end. It looked like something out of a horror movie. Marcus parked, stepped out, and immediately felt the weight of the place. The silence, the isolation. This was where Donovan Eich had lived. This was where he'd come back to after watching the Kesslers, after filming them, after planning whatever he'd planned. Ray walked up to the trailer, peered through one of the broken windows. Let's get inside. The interior was a disaster. Rotted furniture, mold climbing the walls, animal droppings scattered across the floor. The smell was overwhelming. Decay, mildew, something sour and organic. The forensic techs, pulled on masks and gloves, started documenting the scene. Marcus and Ray moved carefully through the wreckage, stepping over debris, shining flashlights into dark corners. The main living area was gutted. Couch cushions torn apart by animals. A table collapsed in the center of the room. Broken dishes, shattered glass. But in the back, past a narrow hallway, they found a door. It was closed. Locked. Marcus tried the handle. It didn't budge. Ray stepped back, nodded. Kick it in. Marcus braced himself, drove his heel into the door just below the handle. The wood splintered. He kicked again. The door flew open. Inside was a small room, maybe 8 by 10 feet, and it was pristine. Unlike the rest of the trailer, this room was untouched. The walls were lined with shelves. On the shelves were boxes, dozens of them, neatly labeled, organized. In the center of the room was a desk. On the desk was a lamp, a notebook, and a stack of photographs. Marcus stepped inside, his flashlight sweeping across the space. The boxes were labeled with names, locations, dates. Morrison family, 1989. Caldwell, summer 1990. Priest River, April 1991. And then, on the bottom shelf, Kessler, 1991. Marcus's hands shook as he pulled the box off the shelf. Inside were photographs, hundreds of them. The Kessler family, at home, at the store, at the park, at church. Close-ups of Rita hanging laundry, Daniel working in the yard, Jacob at bat during a baseball game, Megan on the swing set. Every moment documented, every angle captured. Ray stood beside Marcus, staring at the photos, his jaw clenched. He was obsessed, Ray said quietly. Marcus set the box down, picked up the notebook from the desk. It was a journal, handwritten, pages and pages of entries. He flipped to the first page. The 14th of June, 1991. Saw them at the grocery store today. The mother is careful. She checks her surroundings. The father is oblivious. The kids are loud. I stayed back. They didn't notice me. Marcus flipped forward. The 2nd of July, 1991. Followed them to the lake. They stayed for 3 hours. I parked on the access road, watched through the trees. The boy swims well. The girl is afraid of the water. The mother stayed close to her. Another entry. The 10th of August, 1991. Drove past their house tonight. Lights were on. I could see them through the window. They were eating dinner, laughing. They don't know I'm watching. They never will. Marcus's stomach turned. He flipped to the last entry. The date was September 12th, 1991, 2 days before the Kesslers disappeared. The handwriting was different, shakier, more frantic. They're leaving. I heard them talking, moving to Boise. New job, new house. They're leaving in 2 days. I can't let them go. They're mine. I won't let them leave. Marcus looked up at Ray. Ray's face was pale, his hands trembling. He killed them, Ray whispered. Because they were going to move. Marcus nodded slowly. We need to find the bodies, he said. Marla Eich lived in a small ranch-style house on the outskirts of Sandpoint, tucked behind a row of evergreens that shielded it from the road. The paint was peeling. The lawn was overgrown. A rusted pickup truck sat in the driveway, one tire flat. Marcus and Ray pulled up just after noon on July 8th, 2011. They'd spent the previous 2 days combing through Donovan's trailer, cataloging evidence, boxing up photographs and journals. Every new discovery painted a darker picture of the man, but they still didn't have bodies. They still didn't have a crime scene, and they needed answers. Marla Eich was the only living person who might be able to give them those answers. Marcus knocked on the door. No response. He knocked again, louder this time. A voice called out from inside. Who is it? Coeur d'Alene Police, ma'am. We need to speak with you about your brother. A long pause. Then the sound of a chain sliding, a deadbolt turning. The door opened a crack. A woman peered out. Mid-50s, maybe older. Thin. Gray hair pulled back in a loose bun. Her eyes were wary, tired. What about him? She asked. Can we come in? Marcus asked gently. It's important. Marla hesitated, then stepped back and opened the door. The inside of the house was cluttered but clean. Stacks of magazines on the coffee table. A cat curled up on the couch. The smell of coffee and cigarettes hung in the air. Marla gestured to the couch. Sit. Marcus and Ray sat. Marla remained standing, arms crossed, defensive. What's this about? She asked. Marcus pulled out his badge, showed it to her. I'm Detective Webb. This is Detective Holcomb. We're investigating a cold case from 1991, the disappearance of the Kessler family. Marla's face went pale. We believe your brother Donovan was involved, Marcus continued. Marla shook her head quickly. No, that's not possible. Ma'am, we found evidence, Ray said, his voice firm but not unkind. Surveillance footage, photographs, journals. Your brother was watching the Kessler family for months before they disappeared. Marla sank into a chair, her hands trembling. I don't understand. When was the last time you saw your brother? Marcus asked. Marla stared at the floor. He died in 2004. Heart attack. I found him in his trailer. Before that, when was the last time you spoke to him? I don't know. A few weeks before he died, maybe. We weren't close. Donovan was difficult. Difficult how? Marla looked up, her eyes wet. He was always strange, even when we were kids. Quiet, kept to himself. Our parents didn't know what to do with him. He didn't have friends, didn't date, just existed. She wiped her eyes. After our parents died, I tried to stay in touch. But Donovan didn't want anything to do with me. He'd call once in a while, usually when he needed money. That was it. What did he do for work? Ray asked. Odd jobs, construction, landscaping. He did some photography too, freelance stuff, weddings, portraits, that kind of thing. Marcus leaned forward. Did he ever mention the Kessler family to you? Marla hesitated. Ma'am, this is important, Marcus said. Marla's voice was barely a whisper. Once, maybe twice. What did he say? She closed her eyes, like she was trying to remember. It was the summer of 1991. I ran into him at a diner in Sandpoint. We hadn't seen each other in months. He was different that day. Excited almost. He kept talking about this family he'd been photographing. Did he say their name? No. But he said they were perfect. That they didn't even know he was there. He said it like it was a game. Ray's jaw tightened. What else did he say? I asked him what he meant. and he just smiled. Said I wouldn't understand. Then he left. I didn't see him again for over a year. Marcus pulled out a photo of the Kessler family, handed it to Marla. Is this the family he was talking about? Marla looked at the photo. Her hands started shaking. I don't know. Maybe. I never saw them. I just remember him talking about a family. She set the photo down, covered her face with her hands. Oh God. Did he hurt them? Marcus didn't answer directly. We need to know everything you can tell us about your brother. Where he lived, where he spent his time, who he associated with. Marla took a shaky breath. He lived in that trailer outside Priest River. He'd been there since the late 82nds. Before that, he bounced around. Coeur d'Alene, Bonner's Ferry, Sandpoint. He never stayed anywhere long. Did he have friends? Girlfriends? No, no one. He was a loner. What about hobbies? Interests? Marla hesitated. Photography. That was his thing. He was obsessed with it. He had all this equipment, cameras, lenses, tripods. He'd spend hours in his darkroom developing film. Darkroom? Marcus asked. Yeah. He built one in his trailer. Spent more time in there than anywhere else. Ray and Marcus exchanged a glance. After he died, Marcus said carefully, what happened to his belongings? I cleaned out the trailer. Took what I could sell or donate. The rest I put in a storage unit in Priest River. I couldn't afford to keep paying for it, so eventually it got auctioned off. That storage unit, did you go through everything before you put it there? Marla shook her head. Not really. I just boxed it up. I didn't want to deal with it. Donovan's stuff creeped me out. Why? She looked away. I don't know. It just did. The way he lived. The way he kept everything so organized. It felt wrong. Marcus leaned forward. Marla, we found journals in your brother's trailer. Detailed logs of families he was watching. The Kesslers were one of them. Do you know if he ever talked about hurting anyone? Marla's face crumpled. No. I swear. I didn't know. If I'd known, I would have. Her voice broke. She started crying. Ray stood up, walked over to her, placed a hand on her shoulder. We're not blaming you, but we need your help. Is there anything else you can tell us? Anywhere he might have taken them? Anywhere he might have hidden something? Marla wiped her eyes, thought for a moment. There was a place he used to go. He mentioned it once, said it was quiet, peaceful, somewhere he could think. Where? An old quarry, northwest of Sandpoint. It was abandoned, flooded. He said he'd go there sometimes to take pictures. Marcus felt his pulse quicken. Do you know exactly where it is? Not exactly, but it's off Highway 95, maybe 10 miles out. There's a dirt road that leads to it. I only went there once, years ago. Donovan took me. It was creepy, just water and rocks and nothing else. Marcus stood up. Thank you, Marla. You've been very helpful. Marla looked up at him, her face pale. Do you think he killed them? The Kesslers? Marcus didn't answer. But the look in his eyes said everything. As they walked back to the car, Ray turned to Marcus. A quarry? Yeah. If he dumped the car there, then the bodies might be there too. Ray nodded slowly. We need to get a dive team out there. Now. Marcus pulled out his phone, started making calls. Within the hour, a search operation was being organized. The abandoned quarry northwest of Sandpoint. 20 years after the Kesslers disappeared, they were finally closing in on the truth. That night, Marcus sat in his apartment, staring at the case file spread across his kitchen table. Photos of the Kesslers, surveillance footage, journal entries, maps. He kept coming back to one line from Donovan's journal. They're mine. I won't let them leave. Donovan Eich hadn't just been watching the Kesslers. He'd claimed them, owned them, in his mind. And when they tried to leave, when they tried to escape his control, he'd made sure they never could. Marcus closed the journal, rubbed his eyes. Tomorrow, they'd search the quarry. Tomorrow, they'd find out what Donovan Eich had done. And tomorrow, the Kessler family would finally come home. Before they could search the quarry, Marcus wanted to go back to Donovan's trailer. There was something nagging at him, something he'd missed. The journal had mentioned the quarry, but it hadn't been specific. No coordinates, no detailed directions, just vague references to the water, and the quiet place. If Donovan had been as meticulous as the evidence suggested, there had to be more. A map, notes, something that would lead them directly to where he'd hidden the Kesslers. Marcus drove back out to the property on August 2nd, this time with a full forensic team. They brought ground-penetrating radar, metal detectors, cadaver dogs, everything they had. Ray came too. He wouldn't miss this for anything. The trailer looked even more desolate in the harsh afternoon sun. The forensic team spread out, some working the exterior, others going back inside. Marcus and Ray headed straight for the back room, the one with the shelves, the photographs, the journals. They'd already removed most of the evidence, but Marcus wanted to check again. Sometimes things got missed in the initial sweep. Ray stood in the doorway, looking around. He spent a lot of time in here. Yeah, Marcus said, running his hand along the edge of the desk. This was his sanctuary, where he came to relive it all. He opened the desk drawers one by one. Most were empty now, their contents already bagged and tagged. But in the bottom drawer, tucked in the back corner, Marcus felt something. A piece of paper, folded, wedged between the drawer and the frame. He pulled it out carefully, unfolded it. It was a hand-drawn map, crude, but detailed. A road, Highway 95, labeled at the top. A turnoff marked with an X, a winding path through trees. And at the end of the path, a circle with a single letter inside. Q. Marcus's heart pounded. Ray. Look at this. Ray stepped closer, studied the map. That's it. That's the quarry. Marcus flipped the paper over. On the back, in Donovan's handwriting, was a single line. Where they'll stay. Where no one will find them. Ray's face went hard. Son of a bitch. Marcus called Lieutenant Driscoll immediately. We've got a location. I'm sending you the map now. We need a dive team at the quarry by tomorrow morning. You're sure this is it? Karen asked. Positive. Donovan drew this himself. He knew exactly where he put them. All right. I'll coordinate with search and rescue. Be ready to move at first light. Marcus hung up, looked at Ray. We're going to find them. Ray nodded, but his expression was grim. Yeah, we are. They spent the rest of the afternoon searching the rest of the trailer. In a closet off the main living area, behind a pile of rotting clothes, one of the techs found a metal lockbox. It was rusted, the lock broken. Inside were more photographs, but these were different. They weren't surveillance shots. They were trophies, close-ups of personal items. A hairbrush, a child's toy, a woman's earring, a man's watch. Each photo was labeled with a name and a date. Morrison, 1989. Caldwell, 1990. Henley, 1991. And at the bottom of the box, Kessler, the 14th of September 2091. The photo showed a silver locket, the same locket that had surfaced at the pawn shop. Marcus stared at it, his stomach churning. Donovan hadn't just watched these families. He'd taken things from them, kept pieces of them. How many families are in here? Ray asked, looking over Marcus's shoulder. Marcus counted. 12. Jesus. We need to cross-reference these names with missing persons cases, Marcus said. If Donovan did this to the Kesslers, he might have done it to others. Ray nodded. I'll make the calls. Outside, one of the cadaver dogs started barking. Marcus and Ray rushed out of the trailer. The dog was at the edge of the clearing, near the tree line, pawing at the ground. The handler pulled the dog back, knelt down, examined the area. We've got a hit, the handler called out. Marcus felt his pulse spike. Start digging. Two techs grabbed shovels, began carefully excavating the spot. The soil was soft, loose. Within minutes, they hit something. Fabric. They dug more carefully now, brushing away dirt with gloved hands. A piece of clothing emerged. A shirt. Faded. Stained. Then bones. Small bones. Marcus's stomach dropped. Stop, he said. Mark this as a scene. We need a full excavation team out here. The techs stepped back. One of them looked pale. Ray stood a few feet away, staring at the ground. His hands were shaking. Is it them? He asked quietly. I don't know, Marcus said, but we're going to find out. By evening, the excavation team had arrived. They worked under floodlights, carefully removing soil, documenting every inch. By midnight, they'd uncovered partial remains, enough to confirm they were human, but not enough to identify them. The forensic anthropologist on site estimated the remains had been there for at least a decade, possibly longer. "We'll need to do a full analysis," she said. "DNA, dental records, the works. But based on the size and development of the bones, I'd say this is a juvenile, probably between 8 and 12 years old." Marcus felt sick. Ray turned away, walked back to his car, sat down heavily on the hood. Marcus followed him. "Ray, don't," Ray said, his voice tight. "Just don't." They sat in silence for a long time. Finally, Ray spoke. "I should have found him. Back in '91. I had his name. I had the car. I should have tracked him down." "You did everything you could," Marcus said. "It wasn't enough." Marcus didn't have an answer for that. The next morning, they headed to the quarry. The dive team was already there when Marcus and Ray arrived. 6 divers, 2 boats, sonar equipment, and a mobile command center set up on the shore. The quarry was exactly as Marla had described it. A massive pit filled with dark, murky water, surrounded by sheer rock walls. The surface was still, reflecting the gray sky above. It looked like a grave. Lieutenant Driscoll met them at the command center. Sonar's picking up something about 60 feet down, near the north wall. "Could be a vehicle." "How long until they can get down there?" Marcus asked. "They're suiting up now. Should be in the water in 10 minutes. Marcus nodded, walked to the edge of the water, stared out at the surface. Somewhere down there, beneath the dark water, was the answer. Somewhere down there were the Kesslers. Ray stood beside him, silent. They waited. 20 minutes later, the first diver surfaced. He swam to the boat, pulled off his mask, and gave a thumbs up. "We found it," he called out. "It's a vehicle. Tan sedan. Plates match the Kessler car." Marcus felt a wave of relief and dread wash over him. Anyone inside?" Ray asked, his voice hoarse. The diver shook his head. "Negative. The car's empty, but the trunk's full. Looks like personal belongings, suitcases, clothes." Marcus turned to Karen. "Get a recovery team down there. I want that car pulled up." "Already on it," she said. It took 3 days to haul the car out of the quarry. When it finally broke the surface, water pouring from the windows, Marcus felt his chest tighten. The tan Buick Century, rusted, covered in algae, but unmistakable. They loaded it onto a flatbed truck, transported it to a secure facility for processing. Inside the trunk, just as the diver had said, were suitcases, clothes, shoes, a child's stuffed animal. The Kesslers had been packing, getting ready to leave, but they never made it. Marcus stood there, staring at the car, and felt the weight of 20 years pressing down on him. They'd found the car, but they still hadn't found the family. The discovery of the car changed everything. For 20 years, the Kessler case had been built on questions and theories. Now, they had physical evidence. Proof that something terrible had happened. Proof that Donovan Eich had been involved. But the car raised as many questions as it answered. If the Kesslers weren't inside the vehicle, where were they? Marcus stood in the forensics lab, watching technicians process the Buick. They drained the water, photographed every inch, swabbed for DNA, dusted for prints. The results came back within a week. Fingerprints belonging to Daniel, Rita, Jacob, and Megan Kessler were found throughout the interior, on the steering wheel, the door handles, the dashboard. Expected, normal. But there were other prints too. Prints that didn't match any of the Kesslers. Prints that matched Donovan Eich. His fingerprints were on the driver's side door, on the rearview mirror, on the trunk latch. Donovan had driven this car. He'd opened the trunk. He'd been inside. Marcus felt a surge of vindication. They had him. They could prove Donovan Eich had been in contact with the Kessler vehicle, but they still didn't have bodies. Ray Holcomb sat across from Marcus in the conference room, the case files spread between them. "The car was a dump site," Ray said. "He drove it into the quarry to get rid of it, but he didn't put the bodies inside." "Why not?" Marcus asked. "Because he wanted to keep them separate. The car could be found. It could float. It could be traced. But bodies buried in the woods, those stay hidden." Marcus nodded slowly. "So if the car's in the quarry, the bodies are somewhere else." "Somewhere nearby," Ray said. "Donovan wouldn't have gone far. He was careful, but he wasn't a criminal mastermind. He would have wanted to finish quickly. Get it done. Get out. Marcus pulled out the hand-drawn map they'd found in Donovan's trailer. He studied it again, tracing the path from the highway to the quarry. There's a lot of land around that quarry, Marcus said. Hundreds of acres, dense forest. If he buried them out there, we'll find them, Ray said firmly. We bring in cadaver dogs. We search every inch. The search operation began on September 6, 2011. Exactly 20 years and 8 days after the Kesslers disappeared. A team of 12 officers, 4 cadaver dogs, and 2 forensic anthropologists descended on the area surrounding the quarry. They divided the land into grids, marked each section with flags, and began a systematic search. The terrain was brutal. Thick underbrush, fallen trees, rocky outcroppings, the kind of place where you could hide something and never find it again. But the dogs were trained for this. Marcus walked alongside one of the handlers, a woman named Tessa Briggs, and her German shepherd, a dog named Ranger. Ranger moved methodically through the woods, nose to the ground, tail up. Every few minutes he'd pause, sniff, then move on. Hours passed. Nothing. The sun climbed higher, then began its descent. The team took breaks, drank water, kept searching. By late afternoon, Marcus was starting to lose hope. Then Ranger stopped. He stood perfectly still, staring at a spot about 30 feet off the main trail. His ears perked up. His tail went rigid. Tessa looked at Marcus. He's got something. Marcus's pulse quickened. Where? Tessa walked over to where Ranger was standing, knelt down, examined the ground. It looked like every other patch of forest floor, dirt, leaves, moss, fallen branches. But Ranger wouldn't move. He just stood there, staring. Mark it, Marcus said. Within an hour, the excavation team arrived. They cleared the area, set up a perimeter, brought in lights and equipment. Marcus and Ray stood at the edge of the site, watching as the techs began carefully removing layers of soil. The first few inches were easy, loose dirt, decomposed leaves, roots. Then they hit something harder, compacted soil, the kind that had been disturbed and then settled over time. The lead anthropologist, Dr. Lillian Cross, knelt down, brushed away dirt with a small tool. We've got something, she said quietly. Marcus stepped closer. Dr. Cross uncovered a piece of fabric, faded, rotted, but unmistakably clothing. She kept digging. More fabric. Then bone. A human femur. Marcus felt his stomach tighten. Keep going, Dr. Cross said to her team. They worked slowly, methodically, documenting every step. As the hours passed, more remains emerged. A ribcage, a pelvis, a skull, then another skull, and another. By the time the sun set, they'd uncovered 4 sets of remains. 2 adults, 2 children. Marcus stood there, staring at the excavation site, his chest tight. Ray was beside him, silent, his face pale. It's them, Ray said quietly. It's the Kesslers. The remains were transported to the State Forensics Lab in Boise. DNA analysis would take weeks, but the preliminary findings were enough. 4 individuals, 2 adults, male and female, estimated ages consistent with Daniel and Rita Kessler. 2 juveniles, 1 male, 1 female, estimated ages consistent with Jacob and Megan. The location matched Donovan's map. The timeline matched the disappearance. The evidence matched everything they'd uncovered. It was them. After 20 years, the Kessler family had been found. Dr. Cross called Marcus 2 weeks later with the autopsy results. Cause of death for the 2 adults was blunt force trauma to the head, she said. Multiple strikes, likely from a heavy object, a tire iron, a hammer, something like that. Marcus closed his eyes. And the children? Dr. Cross hesitated. Asphyxiation. Both of them. No signs of blunt force trauma. They were likely restrained and suffocated. Marcus felt sick. There's something else, Dr. Cross said. We found ligature marks on the wrists and ankles of all 4 victims. They were bound before they were killed. Marcus's hands clenched into fists. He tied them up. Yes, and based on the positioning of the remains, they were killed at the site, not transported post-mortem. He brought them there alive, restrained them, and killed them in the woods. Marcus thanked her and hung up. He sat in his office for a long time, staring at the wall. Donovan Eich, had taken the Kessler family from their home on the night of September 14th, 1991. He'd forced them into their car at gunpoint, driven them to the quarry, marched them into the woods, tied them up, and killed them, Daniel and Rita first, beaten to death while their children watched. Then Jacob and Megan, suffocated, murdered in cold blood. All because they were planning to move. All because Donovan couldn't let them go. Marcus felt a rage building inside him that he hadn't felt in years. Donovan Eich was dead. He'd never face trial. He'd never be held accountable. But at least now, the world would know what he'd done. The news broke on September 22nd, 2011. Kessler family found after 20 years. Killer identified. The story spread fast. Local news, national news, true crime blogs, Reddit threads. The Kessler case, once a forgotten mystery, was suddenly everywhere. Reporters camped outside the Coeur d'Alene Police Department. They called Marcus's phone non-stop. They tracked down Marla Eich, Ray Holcomb, anyone connected to the case. Marcus gave one press conference, short, to the point. After 20 years, the Kessler family has been found. Daniel, Rita, Jacob, and Megan were murdered in September 1991 by Donovan Eich, a man who had been stalking them for months. Mr. Eich is deceased, but the evidence against him is overwhelming. This case is now closed. The Kessler family will finally be laid to rest. He didn't take questions. He walked off the stage and went back to work. Ray Holcomb attended the press conference, but he didn't speak. Afterward, Marcus found him sitting alone in his car in the parking lot. Marcus knocked on the window. Ray rolled it down. "You okay?" Marcus asked. Ray didn't answer right away. He just stared straight ahead, his hands gripping the steering wheel. "I spent 20 years wondering," Ray finally said. 20 years thinking I'd failed them, that I'd let them down. "You didn't fail them," Marcus said. "You never gave up. You kept their case alive. Without you, we never would have found them." Ray shook his head. "I should have found them sooner. You did everything you could." Ray looked at Marcus, his eyes red. It wasn't enough. Marcus didn't know what to say to that. Because in a way, Ray was right. It hadn't been enough. Not for the Kesslers. On October 1st, 2011, the Kessler family was laid to rest. A private funeral was held at the Sandpoint Community Church. Only close family and a few friends attended. Marcus and Ray were there, standing in the back, watching as 4 caskets were carried down the aisle. Daniel, Rita, Jacob, Megan. Together again. The service was quiet. A pastor spoke about loss, about faith, about the hope of reunion in the afterlife. Marcus didn't believe in any of that, but he stood there anyway, paying his respects. When it was over, the caskets were taken to a cemetery overlooking Lake Pandore. 4 graves, side by side, each marked with a simple headstone. Marcus stood at the edge of the cemetery, watching as the caskets were lowered into the ground. Ray stood beside him. "They're home now," Ray said quietly. Marcus nodded. "Yeah, they are. We're almost at the end. But what really happened to the Kessler family? And what did investigators learn about Donovan Eich that made this case even more disturbing? Before I reveal the final pieces, hit that subscribe button and share this video. Seriously, your true crime friends need to see this. Drop a comment, are you watching this alone or with someone? The case was closed, officially. The Kesslers had been found. The killer had been identified. Justice, in the only form it could take now, had been served. But Marcus Webb wasn't satisfied. There were still questions. Loose ends that gnawed at him late at night when he couldn't sleep. The remains found at Donovan's trailer, the small bones the cadaver dog had uncovered, hadn't been identified yet. DNA analysis was still pending. And then there were the other names in Donovan's lockbox, the 12 families he'd photographed, the trophies he'd kept. Were the Kesslers the only ones he'd killed? Or were there others? Marcus couldn't let it go. On October 15th, 2011, the DNA results came back on the remains found at Donovan's property. Marcus was in his office when the call came through. "Dr. Cross, from the state lab. We've got an identification," she said. "The remains belong to a juvenile female, approximately 9 years old at the time of death. Her name was Amy Henley." Marcus felt his blood run cold. Henley. That was one of the names in Donovan's lockbox. I know. I cross-referenced it with missing persons cases. Amy Henley disappeared from Priest River in August 1991, 1 month before the Kesslers. Marcus grabbed a pen, started taking notes. What else do we know about her? She was reported missing by her mother on August 18, 1991. She'd been riding her bike near her house and never came home. There was a search, but no leads. The case went cold within a few months. Was Donovan ever a suspect? No. His name never came up. But based on the evidence you found, the photographs, the journals, it's clear he was watching her. Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind racing. If he killed Amy Henley, and he killed the Kesslers, how many others are there? That's what I'm afraid of, Dr. Cross said. Marcus pulled the lockbox from evidence storage. Inside were the 12 photographs, 12 families, 12 sets of trophies. He started running the names through missing persons databases. Morrison, 1,989, no hits. Caldwell, 1,990, no hits. Henley, 1,991, confirmed. Amy Henley, deceased. Kessler, 1,991, confirmed. Deceased. He kept going. Patterson, 1,992, no hits. Whitmore, 1,993, 1 hit, a missing persons case from Coeur d'Alene. A woman named Jennifer Whitmore, age 32, disappeared in June 1993, never found. Marcus's stomach tightened. He kept searching. By the time he was done, he'd found 4 matches. Amy Henley, the Kesslers, Jennifer Whitmore, and a man named Robert Gaines, who disappeared from Bonner's Ferry in 1995. 4 confirmed victims, possibly more. Marcus picked up the phone, called Ray. We need to search Donovan's property again, Marcus said. There might be more bodies. The second excavation began on October 20th, 2011. This time, they brought in ground-penetrating radar, cadaver dogs, and a team of forensic anthropologists. They scanned every inch of Donovan's property, the clearing around the trailer, the woods beyond, the access road leading in. The dogs hit on 3 more sites. The first site yielded partial remains, bones scattered by animals, but enough to confirm they were human. Female, adult, estimated age, early 30s. DNA analysis later confirmed it was Jennifer Whitmore. The second site yielded more remains. Male, adult, estimated age, late 40s. Robert Gaines. The third site was the most disturbing. It was located about 100 yards from the trailer, near a collapsed shed. The dogs went crazy, barking, pawing at the ground. When the excavation team dug down, they found a shallow grave. Inside were the remains of 2 individuals, both juveniles, both female. Estimated ages, 8 and 11. Marcus stood at the edge of the grave, staring down at the small bones, and felt a wave of nausea. Who are they? Ray asked quietly. I don't know, Marcus said, but we're going to find out. DNA analysis took weeks. The remains were in poor condition, degraded by time, moisture, and soil acidity. But the lab was able to extract enough genetic material to run comparisons. The results came back in early November. The 2 juveniles were sisters. Their names were Kayla and Brooke Morrison, ages 7 and 10. They disappeared from Sandpoint in July 1989 while playing in their front yard. Their case had gone cold decades ago. Their parents had long since passed away. But now, finally, they'd been found. Marcus sat in his office, staring at the case files spread across his desk. 7 victims. 7 lives stolen by Donovan Eich. Amy Henley. The Kessler family, Daniel, Rita, Jacob, Megan, Jennifer Whitmore, Robert Gaines, Kayla and Brooke Morrison. And those were just the ones they'd found. How many others were out there? How many families had Donovan watched, stalked, and killed? Marcus didn't know, and he might never know. The media frenzy intensified. Idaho serial killer identified. At least 7 victims confirmed. Donovan Eich, the watcher who became a murderer. Decades-old cold cases solved. Families finally get answers. The story dominated headlines for weeks. Reporters dug into Donovan's past, interviewed people who'd known him, tried to piece together a profile of the man. What they found was chilling. Donovan Eich had been invisible, a ghost. He'd moved through life without leaving a trace, without forming connections, without anyone noticing him. He'd worked odd jobs, lived alone, kept to himself. He had no criminal record, no history of violence, no red flags, until he started killing. Psychologists weighed in, offering theories. Donovan fit the profile of a voyeuristic predator, someone who derived pleasure from watching, from controlling, from possessing. He didn't kill out of rage or impulse. He killed because his victims tried to leave, tried to escape his control. Amy Henley had been moving to Spokane with her mother. The Kesslers had been moving to Boise. Jennifer Whitmore had been planning to relocate to Seattle for a new job. Robert Gaines had been selling his house, preparing to move to Montana. The Morrison sisters, their family, had been talking about moving to Oregon. Every victim had one thing in common. They were leaving, and Donovan couldn't allow that. Marcus gave one final interview. A national news program wanted to do a feature on the case. Marcus agreed, on the condition that the focus remained on the victims, not the killer. The interview aired in mid-November. Marcus sat across from the reporter, a woman named Claire Donovan, and answered her questions. "How does it feel to have solved a case that's been cold for 20 years?" Claire asked. "It doesn't feel like a victory," Marcus said. 7 people are dead. Families were destroyed. We found answers, but we can't bring anyone back. What do you want people to take away from this case? Marcus thought for a moment. That evil doesn't always look like what you expect. Donovan Eich wasn't a monster in appearance. He was ordinary, forgettable, and that's what made him dangerous. He hid in plain sight. He watched. He waited. And when the moment was right, he acted. Do you think there are more victims? I don't know, Marcus said honestly. We're still investigating. But based on what we found, the photographs, the journals, the trophies, it's possible, maybe even likely. Claire leaned forward. What would you say to other families out there who have missing loved ones? Marcus looked directly into the camera. Don't give up. Don't let the case go cold in your heart. Keep asking questions. Keep pushing. Because sometimes, even after decades, the truth comes out. And when it does, it matters. Ray Holcomb watched the interview from his living room. When it ended, he turned off the TV and sat in silence. His wife came in, sat beside him, took his hand. You did good, she said softly. Ray shook his head. I should have found them sooner. You found them, she said. That's what matters. Ray didn't respond. He just sat there, holding his wife's hand, thinking about the Kesslers, thinking about all the years they'd been buried in those woods, thinking about how close he'd come in 1991, how he'd had Donovan's name, had the red car, had all the pieces but hadn't been able to put them together in time. It would haunt him for the rest of his life. But at least now, the Kesslers were home. At least now, they could rest. So what do we take away from the Kessler case? What do we learn from a story this dark, this twisted, this heartbreaking? First, that evil doesn't always announce itself. It doesn't always wear a mask or carry a weapon. Sometimes it's quiet, patient, invisible. Donovan Eich wasn't a Hollywood villain. He was a nobody, a drifter, a man you'd pass on the street and never remember. But he was watching, always watching, and that's what made him so dangerous. Second, that cold cases matter, that the passage of time doesn't erase the need for justice. 20 years, 30 years, 50 years, it doesn't matter. The victims still deserve to be found. The families still deserve answers. Ray Holcomb never gave up on the Kesslers. He carried that case with him for 2 decades, even after everyone else had moved on. And because of that persistence, because of that refusal to let go, the Kesslers were finally brought home. Third, that technology changes everything. The surveillance tapes that Donovan thought would never be found became the key to solving the case. The DNA evidence that didn't exist in 1991 became the proof that sealed his guilt. We live in a different world now, a world where cameras are everywhere, where digital footprints are permanent, where secrets are harder to keep. And that means cases like this, cases that once would have stayed cold forever, now have a chance. Finally, That closure matters. It doesn't bring anyone back. It doesn't undo the pain, but it gives families a place to grieve, a place to say goodbye, a way to move forward. The Kesslers are home now. Amy Henley is home. Jennifer Whitmore, Robert Gaines, Kayla and Brooke Morrison. They're all home. And that matters. If you or someone you know has information about a missing person, don't stay silent. Reach out to local law enforcement. Contact the National Missing and Unidentified Persons System. Speak up. Because somewhere out there, another family is waiting. Another case is sitting cold in a file cabinet. Another victim is waiting to be found. And your information, no matter how small, no matter how insignificant it seems, could be the key. Thanks for sticking with me through this story. I know it was heavy. I know it was hard to hear. But these stories need to be told. These victims need to be remembered. If this case affected you, if it made you think, if it made you feel something, leave a comment below. Share your thoughts. Tell me what stood out to you. And if you want more deep dives into cases like this, hit that subscribe button. There are more stories to tell, more mysteries to uncover, more victims who deserve justice. Until next time, stay safe out there. And remember, someone is always watching.